Dylan, I think you you met Toby first, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And how did that go? And what the hell were you doing before you got roped into this?
Well, we were playing a gig in Hammond, Wisconsin, believe it or not.
Yeah, they're
literally
meant to be.
Yeah, it was meant to be. And yeah, I mean, we just would do one-off random gigs, and the more we would do them, the more I'd come back home and be like, David, you gotta check this guy out. And then he proceeded to say, yeah, whatever. You know? But then after some persistence, he came down to pick up a Leslie, and it just kind of worked out, and we booked a studio date, we got it all arranged, and we just basically jammed in the studio. The first time we jammed, it was recorded instead of the first tune on the first record, so it just kind of glued together. It just was a very natural process.
And everybody in Hammond plays like you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Hammond was
The organ town?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
This big.
Yeah, real small.
You were working on a farm.
I was working on a farm prior to doing this. I had decided it was time to come back to music because I'd done music for years, got jaded, and then
Why?
Totally on me. But I decided one day I got to get back to music, and the next thing I know, I hear this kid who's playing in my neighborhood who knew him, and then the next thing I know, we're doing gigs, and then I was like, I found a Leslie for sale in Milwaukee where they live. I sent him a message like, hey, I'm gonna be in your town, we should have lunch, and he was like, screw that, we should jam. So when I went down, that's what happened.
And you were already playing left-hand bass?
I had started playing left-hand bass a year or two before that.
Okay.
But I wasn't gigging much.
Yeah.
So I was just doing it at home and, playing with the idea.
Yeah, great.
That's awesome that the chemistry happened.
It was immediate.
Yeah.
We knew right away. We went back to the house after we had done the recording session, and Steve, my buddy who owned the studio, sent us the files right away.
Yep, he did.
Uploaded them, and we listened to them like, well, here we go. We're off to the races. And that was March of 2017.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Any of you guys Zappa fans?
Zappa? Oh, absolutely.
What's your favorite albums?
Overnight Sensation.
Yeah, Overnight Sensation. Mine, I would say Overnight Sensation, apostrophe, Live at the Roxy, and Elsewhere were my three first favorite ones.
Those are my.
Yeah. And then, of course, then.
We're like one size fits all.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Steak.
And then later on, I did more of the deep dive. Because, you can have 10 Zappa records and think you're a fan.
Yeah.
Then you realize that there's like 40 records or 50, you know what I mean? Oh, yeah, you haven't heard Great Wazoo? No, I guess I haven't. And then I remember I got to be kind of chummy with Dweezil Zappa, and I've sat in with him before. And remember we were hanging out that one night up in Minneapolis, and I ended up sitting in, but they played this tune. I'm like, what is that tune? There's a tune called Sleep Dirt. And I was like, Sleep Dirt? So then I did the deep dive and found that record. It's like, this record is awesome. And then again, it was just one of those things. So then I started downloading a ton of the Zappa stuff. But my favorite incarnation is that early 70s with George Duke, Chester Thompson, and Ralph Humphreys, and the gang, the Followers.
That was a classic lineup.
It was.
I really enjoyed Chad Wackerman.
Oh, yeah, it was great too, yeah.
That whole rendition of their these guys had great players.
Yeah, no doubt.
And the Joe's Garage stuff with Vinny was...
Yeah, that was diabolical.
It's crazy, he grabs them all when they're super young.
Yeah,
That's what tripped me out, like
Yeah.
Pi, Terry, Vinny, Chad, they were all like 18, 19 playing this ridiculous stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to be there for 3 days, as I recall. 2 days? I can't remember. I went out and all the old videos were done in Steve's basement, that whole wall of amps, with dumbbells and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people thought it was green screen, but those were real. They were all real. And they were in his basement. That's why at the time, don't tell them where they are. And we'd go down to the basement, and I remember the first video we did, he'd already been doing videos down there, but I sat in the chair and then like a little Fender Hot Rod Deluxe amp and like a BB preamp or an OCD pedal or something. And there was a little teleprompter, and on the teleprompter it just said the name of the guitar, the color, the weight, and the serial number. And he goes, well, just play the guitar, play each pickup setting, clean and dirty, some different styles, and then if you want to make a comment on what you think of the guitar, then cool. So camera starts rolling, I play, I say some stuff, I get done, and he stands up and he walks across the room. He's like, "Can I hire you to do this?" I go, "Well, what are we doing with that?" And he goes, "I will fly you out here every month to do this." I go, "You mean kind of like a job?" And he's like, "You can call it whatever you want." And the funny thing about it was that for years, at that point, it had been 15 years, I had done Fender stuff, and I was never an employee of Fender. I never had a retainer with Fender. I just had relationships with, the Fender USA people, but I had relationships with all the Fender entities all over the world, and made a good stipend of my income was doing Fender stuff. And we had finally gotten to the point where I was at a NAMM show just prior to Steve calling me to do this thing at Wildwood. And I remember I was sitting with one of the honchos from Fender, and I said, "Hey, I've never asked you guys for a retainer or anything." And they're like, "Yeah, we're surprised you haven't." And I'm like, "Well, my oldest is about ready to go to college, so if we could kind of nail something down, that'd be great." "Oh, absolutely." And so this is saying I didn't do crap because it's a corporate hellscape. Did I say that out loud? I did, and I meant it. So, anyway, so in that moment, when I talked to Steve, he guaranteed me more money than Fender ever guaranteed me to do it. And so, I started to do 3 days a month, coming out and doing all the Fender stuff. And then, I played Gibsons for years and whatnot. And I was like, "Steve, I sure love the Les Pauls. I could play the hell out of one of those too." He's like, "Well, if you could do these other guitars, I could use even more." And so then I started doing all the guitars. And then it just turned out to be an easy thing. I come out, and initially we were doing 30 guitars a day, which is a lot.
It's a lot of licks.
It's a lot of licks.
I actually, I discovered you from watching you did a demo of a 1958 VOS Les Paul.
Yep.
And I was like, man, this guy, the licks, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, been listening ever since.
Oh. Yeah, it's, I always tell people that of all the things I did over the years, up to that point, I'd done the Fender thing for, as I said, like 15 years, going all over the world and being their quote-unquote ambassador for their brand. And then, I'd done all the Hal Leonard DVDs and a bunch of books and clinics for them. And then I had a record deal on Steve Vai's label. I got a bunch of press for that. And then I wrote for a bunch of guitar magazines and had like columns, monthly columns in Guitar Player magazine, all the different guitar magazines at one point or another. But it all paled in comparison to the Wildwood thing, because it basically just allowed me to sit in a chair and play guitar and then talk and just unfiltered.
They're sick.
And so as a result of that, that's kind of what really helped a great deal. Now the next tier of that was being on Rick Beato. That was massive.
Was it?
Yeah, it was crazy. The amount of sales. I mean, as soon as it went live, my phone was going crazy with the sales from my website. It was insane. Yeah, so that was a good thing. I mean, not all of those things do that. You'll do something like, "Oh, this is going to be a really good, way to get the word out," and it's like, not so much. But with the Beato thing, it was the right people watching that thing, and it was fantastic. So that was great. And he was cool. During COVID, he was doing a thing like his favorite Instagram guitar players or whatever, and I was on one of his compilations. I was like, "Oh, he knows who I am. That's cool." So then I started the podcast, because during COVID, both Wildwood and Fishman were like, what else can we do to get some things going? Should we do a podcast? I'm like, okay. So I started a podcast, and so I reached out to him to be on the podcast. So I had his contact info. He was on the podcast. And then when I put this new record out, I'm Devin Ohm, and I've been doing those All New Bets things, and I've been chatting with Devin Ohm, and he's trying to help me out with kind of expanding the audience a little bit. And we put out this blues compilation record, and along with some new tracks on it. And it's kind of hard. The traditional things of being on guitar magazines or just magazines in general, it's not really a thing anymore. The YouTube is thing. And so I told him, I go, "Boy, if I can get on Rick Beato, that would be awesome." He's like, "Who?" I go, "Dude."
Oh, man. man.
So then I sent an email to Rick Beato, and I basically said, hey, long time to see you, hope you're doing good, yeah. I've got this new record out, I can't think of a better place to format or to get the word out than to be on your show. And he got back to me right away, saying, it's so weird, I was just talking about you last night and saying how much I'd love to have you on my channel. Awesome, we have the same account, which is, he's got a lot more work to do on his return. But anywho, so he's like, yeah, I said, this month is good. It was in December. I go, the second half of the month, I'm wide open. He's like, well, how's the 18th? Can you fly down to Atlanta? So I went down there, and it's all done at his house, and sat down, and we were done probably in an hour, just big bang boom. And then it was kind of fun afterwards. It's like, all these young kids, these shredder guys, they can't play their own stuff. They come in here and do 30 takes. And sometimes they have to bring the stuff home so they can doctor the stuff. Fascinating. But that was awesome. And then it came out, and I remember when it came out because it was right when Rick was out doing this George Benson camp. And my accountant was also with him at this camp. And he called me, and I was doing a gig, and I was like, why is Alan Friedman calling me? So I was like, Alan, what's going on? He's like, your video's blowing up, it just got, and I'm like, what? So then that's how I found out it went live. And then it was just crazy. The sales coming in, next thing you know, the record's #1 on the Billboard Blues chart, it was #1 on Apple Music, it was #1 on Amazon, it was crazy. It's like, thank you, Rick Beato.
Your playing's been good for years and years and years, and the band's been really good for years and years.
Oh, but it's just getting the word out, man.
Yeah, that's really all it is. It takes that connection.
Right.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Well deserved.
It's been good, and we've been having fun. So now we got a new agent now. That's going good, and we're going out with the Alma Vets band for about 10 days on this tour this summer, and we're just booking up the schedule and hitting the road. It's just the three of us. We go out like pirates.
What are you guys driving?
The Gristle Missile. Which is a Ford Transit 250.
Cool.
And for years we were driving, Toby has a Tahoe. Toby has a Tahoe, there's a song there. Toby has a Tahoe. And a trailer. So it kind of how it all developed that we started to just drive everywhere was we had some gigs in California surrounding the NAMM show. And I think the first year we flew out. And in one of the first things we did when I started playing with the Tobys, I was doing a little mini NAMM show at Sweetwater. And I remember I heard this guy playing organ, and I looked over, and there was the Hammond booth. And so I go over, and I'm walking in there, and the guy playing Hammond looks up, and he's like, hey Greg, I'm a big fan, and I also play guitar. I'm like, oh shit. And so we started shooting the breeze. Well, he's the Hammond Artist Relations guy. I'm like, well, my good man. I have this new band with organ playing Leviathan of the night and of the day. And so next thing you know, he's hooked up with an endorsement. I'm like, this is great. This is going to help us get organs wherever we need. Because going over to Europe, what are we going to do for an organ? We can't fly over to Europe. Anyways, Hammond is bar none the worst company on the planet. for assisting in any manner, way, shape, or form. So next thing you know, we got to be out in LA, and we're going to be there for the NAMM show. He's actually playing at the Hammond booth, and we're like, can we get some help with some gear? Because we got some club dates while we're there. So next thing you know, we're renting a Hammond every night for $750.
Whoa!
So after that, we're like, we're driving. So then we started driving everywhere, and then once the Tahoe got north of 200,000 miles, we're like, we're playing on fire. Then I was like, it's time. So
did you have to carry the Hammond up those stairs at the?
Oh, there's an elevator.
Oh, good.
We've done that
You
before.
probably call
Yeah. But so I ended up looking around and trying to find something, and I was toying with the idea of like maybe getting a Suburban and a trailer or whatever, and then I started looking into, the Sprinters, they're all diesel, and I didn't want to do that. And so then my brother-in-law, kind of like he works for Hammond too, but my nephew-in-law hooked me up with this Ford dealership, and it was just a Mongolian cluster of blank. But anyway, I ended because they make passenger versions of the Transit, and it has windows everywhere in the seats, and then they make just the cargo versions. So he's like, well, I got a guy that can put seats in a cargo thing and put a bulkhead in it. I'm like, great. He goes, well, once you buy the van, it'll take 12 weeks for them to get it. 12 weeks? What? That's ridiculous. So I was dragging my feet. Finally, this guy calls me up and he says, I got a guy who can do it in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. So then we went in, bought the van, and I told him, we got a tour starting in February, whatever it was. Oh, we'll be done in plenty of time. We'll be done in 2 weeks. No problem. The Friday before the next Friday we're supposed to leave, my salesman calls me up and is like, yeah, they're still not done. I'm going to Puerto Rico for a few days. And I said, listen, pal, I'm going to have a vehicle one way or the other. And you're going to provide one. And so they gave us a vehicle. I said, these are the things that'll work. We can use a passenger van, we'll have to take out the seats. And so that's what we ended up doing. We've got a passenger van for it, so I showed them all the seats are. And they're like, oh, it's so easy to take them out. Like, oh, okay, no problem. So I get home and I start trying to take these seats out, and they're like, I'm going on YouTube, and it's like some MacGyver stuff to get these seats out. So then, you had to leave the 2 seats back, and then the side seats had to stay in because they're bolted in. I mean, they're not to be taken out. And I was able to move 2 benches out. And I call up these guys, I'm like, dudes, you need to be able to get these seats. I gotta get an organ in this thing. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. And so somehow there was enough room between those 2 seats in back that we could get the organ and Leslie through. And then we would just make like a little pile. There's the middle. And then away we went. And then we went out, we drove all the way from Wisconsin and Minnesota to California. We routed there. And then that was the one where we went up to Seattle too.
Yeah, that's right.
And then all the way east again. So the good news is we put a lot of miles in their vehicle.
Yeah.
And then I get back. And they're like, your vehicle's done. So I go to pick up the vehicle. And they put the bulkhead behind the first row of seats. So that the second row of seats was behind the bulkhead. I was like, this is not a prison vehicle. I thought the instructions were pretty specific. So then we had to wait again as they recombobulated and so on and so forth. So, yeah, as I like to say, people, if given an opportunity to disappoint, they're going to come through it.
Speaking of gristle,
Yes.
I was introduced to you like in the mid-2000s when you were demoing the DGTM
Yes.
by Tim Jarnig.
Yes.
So I bought one.
Yes.
I still have it.
Yes.
So thanks.
Well, that pedal is my Gristle King pedal, which we sell. It's half of it is the DGTM and the other half's the Clean Boost. So that's what the Gristle King pedal is. And Tim is still doing great.
Are you rocking the Koch Monster?
I am indeed.
I can't wait to figure it out.
I use the Supreme,
Yes.
but I do have a couple of just the regular Koch Monsters for sale. And I have the t-shirts, which are glorious.
Oh,
Yes, the merch they are working. Questions, don't be afraid. As you can tell, I have many stories. Yes.
What's the most you guys have ever freaked out a sound man?
You mean tonight?
Any good milk?
It is in Germany.
Yeah.
It's in Europe. In the States, we seldom get harangued.
Yeah, it's
But in Germany especially. I remember we played at this one place where they're always like, oh my God, it's so loud. I'm like, you did book the band.
there are acoustic drums.
Right. The drums alone are going to be loud, and then
Yeah.
as soon as I turn my amp on, they're like, oh, that's very, I'm like, this isn't even battle volume. Oh! And we started running through this new tune, and I think we got the arrangement. So I grabbed my phone out and put it on the stage, and I was like, let's try one more time. So we play the tune, we get the arrangement right. As soon as we hit the last note, we hear this guy like scream. And it was from German, so it's like, it's so loud, I can't take it! It's not that loud. So we named the song Gunther's Fury. But yeah, they freak out. They're like, oh my God, it's so loud. I'm like, they just don't understand. And I don't even, you know, you think back to the days when people brought in like Marshall stacks and stuff. Like, what did they do?
Yeah.
You know, it's insane. So yeah, that's where we get the most pushback. But we just say, well, you know, we cooperate, and then at one point when we're at a level that we think is as low as we can possibly go, and they're still freaking out, we're like, we're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah. Yep.
This is what's happening.
What's the loudest you played? Sorry. Or like, what was the biggest? Like, if you played through a couple full stacks, like I see.
No, I don't do that.
Hendrix, was that just scary loud back then? I can't even.
It must have been. Yeah. I mean, I did some gigs with Buddy Miles, and that's what I wanted to know. I was like, Buddy, what was the stage volume? He didn't really give me an answer. You know, he was like, because they were all, you know, zonked. So, but yeah, I didn't get any good answers. But you know, I do remember, you know, the Marshalls, they're loud, but they sound good.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like this deafening. You turn the volume down, you got your clean sound, you turn it up, and I remember I saw the Greg Allman band. I was a senior in high school. They were playing at this club in Madison, Wisconsin, and they were doing, and the Allman Brothers had, the second incarnation of the Allman Brothers had just broken up, the third incarnation. And so, and Greg Allman was kind of on hard times, just like traveling around, touring around. And it was before the I Know Angel record came out, so it was before all of that stuff. And he was doing this tour with the Outlaws, and they would flip-flop of who opened every night. One night the Outlaws would open, one night Greg Allman would open. So in this particular night, Greg Allman was opening up. So I get to the club, and I'm sitting there, and I'm there to see Greg Allman, you know. And because Danny Toller, his guitar player, is one of my favorites, right? So they start playing, there's like 25 people there. And I can't even believe it. I'm like, there's freaking Greg Allman. And there was like no one on the dance floor, so I just walked up and went right like this on stage. And I was right in front of Danny Toller with a full stack. And it sounded glorious. It wasn't like, hold your head, it just was the greatest sound I've ever heard. So I think those old Marshalls, especially, I mean, even the 100 watts, you know, you're using two cabinets, you turn the volume down, it cleans up that, you turn it up. Although I will say, remember, the first time I saw J.D. Simo, he was an old buddy of mine. I know J.D. since he was a teeny bopper. And he was playing at the club. I was like, I'll come and see it. And he was playing at this club in Nashville, the Cannery, and it was a lot of hard surfaces, and he had a 100-watt Marshall. And that was so loud that even though I had earplugs in, the inside of my ear was vibrating. And I was like, we have to go. This is astounding. And now my favorite thing about JD is like, well, I'm into little amps. Interesting transformation. But he's a good dude.
I have more of a personal question.
Yes.
It seems like artists go through these waves of like, you know, as they progress in their art aspect of what they're doing, they get to these walls and they're like, screw it, I'm done, I'm gonna go work on a farm, I'm gonna go do something else, right? So what are some times that you guys have had, and how do you kind of break through some of those barriers to continue? You know, to be like, I'm not gonna go work on a farm, or I'm gonna, you know, or I'm just gonna hang it up for 6 months, or a year, or 2 years.
That's a good point.
You know, what were the things that got you guys through that? Because I mean, I think every profession has that, you know.
Well, early on, you know, my band was pretty popular in my hometown of Milwaukee. And when I first got out of college, I kind of had this cool little situation. You know, when you're in your early 20s, you don't need much.
Yeah.
And, you know, I worked at this music store during the day. It was the cool store where all the cool guitar players worked there, and all the rest of them shop there. And I got benefits, you know, through the place. And then I booked my band all over town, all the festivals, you know, so I gigged and I worked at this music store. And then it got to the point where I quit the music store, I was just doing some lessons and just gigging all the time. And again, in your 20s, let the good times roll, you know, could make rent and so on and so forth, but then you get married and all of a sudden, oh, Dylan's coming. And so now I've got a Bambino, and so I was like Mr. Mom in it, but still gigging. And then I started doing sessions. I started to do the Fender thing a little bit. I'd do maybe a week or two of clinics a year. But compared to what my wife was working as a graphic designer for a high-end, you know, ad agency, and she was making good loot. It was awesome. And then, you know, we had 2 kids going on through. But you know what sucked about back then is because, you know, I would go to her work parties and stuff, and I was the loser musician. You know, and I would have to hear these comments from these, you know, cretins. Not that I'm judging, but, you know, they totally were. And and then when we were having our 3rd kid, I have 4 kids altogether, when we were having our 3rd, my wife was like, hey, is there any way you could like fire up your game to the point where I could like stay home with the kids for like a year? And I was like, okay, let's do a quick recap. You want me to make what I'm making, okay? But then you want me to make what you're making, right? All together as a guitar player in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So it was surreal. So, but a bunch of things lined up. I mean, it was the craziest thing. You know, as I said, I've been doing the Fender thing, and Fender did offer me a job at one point. They had this thing, they had called me up and they said, hey, there's this position available, and it's basically a guy to go out and demo all the amps. We're calling the position facetiously Amp Boy. And so like, I am not Amp Boy. And then they offered me the dough, and I was like, okay, that's less than my wife makes, you know. And then I had to move to Phoenix. I was like, okay, so you want me to move my whole family to Phoenix? My wife hates bugs, mind you. And so I was going to be gone all the time. I'm envisioning a scenario where I'm like in Australia, you know, as Amp Boy. And my wife calling saying, there's a tarantula in the, you know, in the bathroom or whatever. And then of course, you know, I'd have been in divorce court, the kids would have ended up on a hotel or something. So I said no to that. So now, fast forward a couple years later, now I'm like, well, a job at Fender would be a saving grace at this point. And they're like, well, we don't really have anything, but you know, we have this new amp.
Amp Boy's killing it.
That's right. Amp Boy is killing it. Amp Boy was actually turned out to be Shane Nicholas, who was their marketing manager for amplifiers for years, and just retired a few years ago. Anyway, so they were debuting this new amp at the NAMM show, and they wanted me to be the guy that unleashed it. And it was one of those things too. They would do this thing to me many times over the years. Like, yeah, there's this amp. If you could like check it out, see what you think of it, and you know, maybe have a couple tunes to play with it, and you know, talk about it. That'd be great. And so I get this amp like 2 weeks before I have to go to California to debut this thing, and I think I had like some kind of manual, but I was Mr. Mom at it, so I had no time to mess with it until like one Saturday afternoon. I dropped, my wife stayed with the kids, I went over to my sister's house where I could crank this amp, and I figured it out. And one day, I had to do it in one day. So then I figured, oh, this is cool. It was the Cyber 20. So I figured out, oh, it's cool. I can use a tweak bassman, but I can put blackface reverb on it. I can have like a vibratone and this, that, and that. I figured it all out. So I go to NAMM, I debut this amp, and everything blows up. As a result of me doing that, Fender was like, we've got money for you. So I was like, just on that alone, we're set. I mean, we weren't rich based, but I could pay the bills. And then the Hal Leonard book deal came through, so I was, you know, we wrote the Hal Leonard Guitar Method books 1, 2, and 3, and then I started a bunch of other stuff. I was doing clinics for them, so that was another stipend. And then Steve Vai's guy was, A&R guy was up there, and I got the record deal with Steve Vai. So all that stuff happened in one fell swoop. So, but prior to that, I mean, I was trying to think, how can I possibly make a living? I talked to a buddy of mine at a marketing place, and I thought, God, I hate these people. They're the worst. And then I was thinking about maybe doing some incidental music, like for commercials and stuff, because I used to record at a place that was also a place that did, it was a finishing house that did all kinds of stuff. And I, you know, stuck my foot in that water and thought, these are more of the worst people. And so luckily all that other stuff turned out. And then over the years, it's just been like when the Fender thing died, the Wild thing he'd done. You know, when one band kind of went its way, another band started. Or, you know, when the Howlander thing went away, the True Fire thing came. And when, you know, so it just, you know, once I made my mind up that I was just gonna do the thing, you just gotta keep on the refills. Yes. But it's,
Thanks for feeding me, bro.
Didn't know it was that bad, Dad.
you were chilling like a villain. Well, the thing about the Fender thing was wild because I didn't ever have a retainer, right? So at the beginning of the year, I'd go to the NAMM show, and I'd be busy at the NAMM show. I'd be playing all the time. They had like a little theater, and I'd hook up with all these different other musicians and kind of be like the house guy that would put that together. And then in the meantime, I'd have to schmooze. Well, I gotta make sure I talk to the England guy to make sure I get some gigs in England this year. Oh, there's the Italian distributor.
It never stops.
Right. So I'm like, okay, it looks like October I'm gonna be here. And I'd have all sketched out, but then Fender would be like, you know, a month before, yeah, remember we said it was gonna be 2 weeks in July, it's gonna be a weekend. And then you're like, oh, interesting. But then I would look at my, as I used to call it, my off-site Fender storage facility of all the gear they sent me, and then I would just sell stuff when I needed to. But it worked out. And then, you know, that's back in the days where I was like telling these guys, like, you know, my wife quit her job, so insurance, I had to pay for insurance, pay for debt, all that stuff.
And I got braces.
Yeah, they all had braces. So, but it all panned out, and I enjoyed everything I got to do. So it was none of the things, I mean, I never was like, oh, I have to fly over someplace and play guitar and get fed and stay in a nice hotel. Ooh, I mean, it was all fun stuff. So, I mean, the only quasi downside thing is that, you know, I was putting out these records and never really got a chance to go on the road and promote them accordingly. So, and so after all these years, you got like 20 records, and then, you know, people hear you play, you know, 30 seconds on an Instagram video, and they think they know all about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, let me do a little homework. That's what's been my major thing. It's like, you know, my dad used to say this thing all the time. He said, pissed me off when I was a kid. If I asked him a question about something history-wise or just world-wise or whatever that he thought I should have known the answer to, he'd go, look it up. Where? What do you mean, look it up? You know, we had the World Book Encyclopedia. You know, yeah, World Book Encyclopedia. Or else you'd go to your library at your school, or you'd go to the library, and you would look it up. You know. And then as far as musician stuff was concerned, it's like, you know, you'd read Guitar Player magazine, like when I first read about Albert Lee, like, who did this guy listen to? Jimmy Bryant, and, you know, Hank Garland, and, you know, Chet Atkins, and Merle Travis, and I'm like, well, where am I going to find these? I mean, Chet Atkins records were easy to find, but, you know, James Burton, and nowadays, everything, the world is in the phone, but yet, I'll post something and I'll say, oh, this thing, I'm playing this song, I'm using this piece of gear, pickups are this, you know, yada, yada, yada. Every question, not every question, but a lot of like, what song is that? What piece of gear are you using?
Did you watch the first 5 seconds of the
It's literally in the thing! Do your homework!
Look it up, read slower.
It's just, it's bizarre, because it's just so wild now. I mean, there's various different things about the music industry, obviously, with streaming and so on and so forth. That level of money coming in from that is nowhere near what it was, but there are other ways because of the internet that you can make money, which is awesome. But the access to information is so awesome. I mean, anytime I just get the wildest hair, like, God, I never had that record back in the day. I always wanted to learn that song. Boom! There it is. And yet this guy, what amp are you using? What pickups are those? I'm like, oh my God! Go ahead, let's make the time. Let's get you up there.